with paper in his hand.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Joseph Teklemariam, and I'm an Eritrean, and I'm going to be asking about Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Ethio-Eritrean relationship. The border thing. One, which part of the final and binding of the Algiers agreement doesn't the US, the UN, and any party which was the guarantor of the Algiers agreement don't understand? You were not there, Madeleine Albright was there, but it's the same administration, well, different party. And the second thing about putting Eritrea into the sponsor of terrorist countries, you know it, the Bush administration, anybody knows it, that Eritrea is the only country in that region which fought all the Islamist jihadists. And it's so funny for Foreign Minister Siyum Masfin on the last meeting of the Eritrean oppositions to meet the Eritrean Jihad movement's chairman in his country and calling Eritrea terrorist country. Isn't that ironic? And secondly, why does the US administration have a double standard when it comes to Africa? What's the difference between the elections in Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Ethiopia? In Kenya, the opposition won, but you were the one who were there. Personally, you set up a coalition government between the ruling party and the opposition, but when the whole world knows the opposition clearly won. Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe is not my favorite person. He has to go, but Shanghai won, and the US administration pushes on that Shanghai won, but they didn't push that the opposition of the Kenyan opposition won. So why don't they tell Shanghai to have a coalition party just so that there will be a bloodshed in that country? And third, the same thing with Ethiopia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those questions. They're very good. On final and binding, we understand what final and binding mean of the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission. And I thank you for that question because it gives me an opportunity to clarify. And I don't know that it'll ever get clarified if people don't want to believe what I'm saying. But I can tell you that, you know, I've been personally charged with somehow trying to overturn the Ethiopia-Eritrea Boundary Commission decision. It's just not true. And if I can take some time to go through this, because I think it's important, and especially for this audience to hear. Whether you believe me or not, I'm telling you the truth.
I'm beginning to believe it because we're not pushing Ethiopia into accepting the final and binding ruling.
Let me explain how I was perceived as somehow not accepting final and binding. First, I met with Yamani Gebre in my office and talked to him about what role the United States might play. First, no, that's not first. That's second. First, this problem, this standoff, this impasse between Ethiopia and Eritrea, as you said, started before the Bush administration. I, as Assistant Secretary, never felt it was an issue that the United States should involve itself in. Because I felt that you had two leaders who were extremely stubborn, and it was very difficult to bridge that gap between them. You know, normally you try to do that through some form of mediation. Kofi Annan put significant pressure on President Bush and Secretary Rice for the United States, because Eritrea and others were saying only the United States can somehow resolve this impasse. I never felt that was possible, but we were pushed into it. My bosses said, take it up. I said, I do what I'm told. I said, okay. My approach to this, whenever I'm dealing with any conflict, is to go to the area. I talked to the Eritreans and I said, the best thing for me to do is to go and have a look at the border so I can better understand it, better understand the demarcation process, better understand the UN forces that are there, better understand the temporary security zone. Eritrea said, no, we don't want you to go to the border. I said, but I would go to Eritrea first as a signal that the EEBC says, you know, Badme belongs to Eritrea, it's final and binding. They said no. as long as you're going to the border, we're not going to give you a visa, we're not going to let you in our country, you can't go to the border. And Yamani, to his credit, really tried with President Isaias to get him to accept that I could go through Eritrea to the border. But President Isaias eventually said no. So I said, well, so be it, I'll go to the border through Ethiopia.
That's illegal. Badma is Eritrea, it's not Ethiopia.
I don't care. What I
What
said
is
is...
Thank you very much. If you don't care,
That's your
Can't never answer the question. We will close down.
Do you want to hear my answer or not?
Oh, no, it's
The
clear.
point is that Asmara is not Badme and Addis Ababa is not Badme. The point was, where was I going to get to the border, not just Badme. I was going to go through Asmara. When they said no, I had to go through Addis Ababa. You got to go through Ethiopia or Eritrea, one or the other, to get to the border. And I didn't just go to Badme.
We passed the border.
but that didn't change the verdict, though. That didn't change the verdict. Still Badma is Eritrea.
The point wasn't to change the verdict. The point was for me to get a better understanding of the implementation, the challenges that the UN would have in the implementation of the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission decision. That was the point. But what I understood later was that the reason why President Isaias didn't want me to go to the border was because he felt that if I went to the border, it was somehow renegotiating the boundary decision. That was just a misperception on his part. It was never intended to renegotiate. So that's the first point. So we accept, just the bottom line, we accept that what the EEBC is final and binding. We have no problems with that. It is part of this push for America to try to bring these two parties. Essentially, Ethiopia had, at that point, decided it was no longer going to participate in the EEBC meetings. Eritrea was still participating through its American lawyer. Ethiopia wasn't through its American lawyer. So what we did was we said, look, let's bring these two parties back to the EEBC. We got Ethiopia back to the EEBC. Frankly, we were working with General Fulford as our sort of envoy. He had several communications with the American Eritrean lawyer, i.e. an American who was representing Eritrea, and the American who was representing Ethiopia. There was a misunderstanding. I don't know what it was. I really don't know what it was. What we were trying to do in that mediation was to give technology, essentially use satellite imagery that would look at that border, which if you look at that border, you'll see that there are many communities that are divided by it, and say, how will you two leaders or you two countries address this issue? Are you going to address it by open borders? How are you going to address the issue of the division of this line, which is true in all border demarcations? But they got mixed up. I don't know the details of it. And Eritrea then withdrew from the EEBC. So that was a problem. At that point, we withdrew. Now, just to bring this to a close, because I have two more questions from you. There's a book by Bolton, the U.S. Ambassador to the UN. And in that book, I was quite surprised because Bolton said, I was surprised when I heard it in the news. Bolton said that I had agreed to shut down UNMI, which is true, to shut down UNMI. But then I reversed myself and decided to reopen the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission issues. When I read the book, I said, now, why did he say that? That's simply not true. What I think he was saying is that we had agreed as in America that our approach would be to shut down UNMI. But that when Kofi Annan pushed us to deal with the EEBC, he felt that I was extending its life and now getting in the middle of this conflict. I think that's how I interpret what he was saying. He may not have known the communication between Kofi Annan and Secretary Rice and President Bush for why we actually got in the middle of the EEBC issues. In the final analysis, we're right back where we were when we started this, which is at